From Vassar College, this is Conversations at the Salt Line with Wesley Dixon.
On this episode, a conversation with Marie Solis.
Hi everyone, it's me, Wes, and welcome to another episode of Conversations at the Salt Line. Today, we're welcoming an incredible Vassar alum and journalist, Marie Solis, class of 15 at Vassar, who now works as a style editor at the New York Times. Thanks for coming, Marie.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. How does it feel being back on campus?
It's great. I was saying on my way in that springtime at Vassar is just so special. I remember always looking forward to the tulips being installed in Main Circle. Yeah. So it feels great.
It's sort of intimidating to me to talk to a professional writer about springtime at Vassar because that alone could be sort of like a Pulitzer Prize winning.
You think I'm going to start
right? Exactly.
Spinning some metaphors.
Yes, exactly. Describing like the colors of the tulips in like very arcane ways and colors I didn't know existed. But it's such an honor to have you here today, nonetheless. Thanks for being here, Marie.
Thanks so much.
So I have a couple of things before we really get started that I just have to say. So you, of course, are an employee of the New York Times.
Yes.
Which is super cool. We'll get into that in much.
Fact check, true.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I'm not lying today. I'm not some public official that does that. But I have to say, so I engage with the Times in a variety of ways. I read the Daily, I listen to the variety of podcasts. But my favorite way, frankly, of engaging with the Times,
let's hear it,
is by playing Connections.
Yes.
I play every day.
What time of the day?
Okay.
Is this part of your morning routine?
Well, I have a horrible sleep schedule. And by which I mean that I don't sleep continuously throughout the night. So I'll go to sleep actually quite early because I wake up to go to the gym really early. But I wake up probably around, for the first time, probably like 1:30 or 2. So I start playing when I wake up in the middle of the night. And I would say I have a pretty decent success rate overall. And if I start playing at 1 or 2, I might get a category or 2. I might get stumps, and I'll just wait until I wake back up. Yes, exactly.
Your unconscious mind is
you understand.
Is working it out.
Exactly. So today
you wake up with clarity.
That's how it happens. Frankly, I never press reshuffle. I never do or shuffle. I never press shuffle.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way for me. I just wake up, and my mind has shuffled it by itself, and I see it differently when I wake up. So I haven't finished today's yet. I only have 2 categories, and I only have 2 guesses left. So I'm a little bit stressed. I don't know if you finished today's. I'm a little bit stressed about that. But I play Connections, but I have never had the opportunity to talk to a Times employee to give them my feedback and what I think is a very helpful idea. Can I share it with you?
Yes. I should say that I have nothing to do with the Connections.
I figured that.
But I'm happy to run this up the ladder.
Please. No, please. I'm serious. You heard it here first. If this change is implemented.
Okay.
It's Wesley's idea, okay? I have always thought that there should 100% be a 17th tile. No question about it. Because
just to kind of introduce another layer of difficulty.
Yes, I think
one of these things doesn't go into any of these categories.
Yes, the point is you have to actively get all 4. You cannot only get 3 and then get the 4th out of elimination, right? Mm-hmm. So I think if there's a 17th tile, you have to really feel like you accomplished something by getting all 4 and maybe add another guess if we add that dimension. But I just feel like
what I'm hearing is you're a really hardcore Connections player.
I love Connections.
Well, this actually, with Wordle, you can play it in hard mode, which is kind of just how I naturally play it and how I feel that it is meant to be played.
You're a wordsmith.
I'm clearly a wordsmith. But in hard mode, you can't sort of do any kind of hack where you just pick a totally different word that has none of the letters that you've already used. You have to use the information that you got from your last guess.
Yes.
So maybe eventually Connections will introduce a hard mode.
I would love it.
For freaks like you.
I would love it. Yes, I'm happy to be a Connections freak. I'm happy to be, and I'm happy to be on the team that's ideating, pressure testing, editing.
Okay, next time they're beta testing something, I will recommend.
Please call me. My friend just told me about the new New York Times game that I haven't played yet, but I've seen.
Strands.
Yes. So I haven't played, but I've seen, and it seems like it could be fun. I am trying to limit how many New York Times games I play.
Well, it's for me, I play them every morning.
Yeah.
like first thing when I wake up, I start with the spelling bee, then I go to Wordle, then I go to Connections, and as more games become added, my morning routine becomes longer and longer.
Yes.
So
I love
but
that.
it's, you know, it's a good thing. It
I
does
love that.
bring a lot of people to the New York Times through that
Yes.
kind of side door.
It's a gateway
So,
drug.
Yes.
So let's talk about not the Times per se yet, but just your life as a writer and as a journalist. And you told me actually that, of course, part of that story starts here at Vassar. So can you reflect for us and for the listeners on how Vassar sort of was involved in your journey to journalism?
Absolutely. So it really started in my freshman seminar. I forget the name of that seminar, but it was taught by Professor Amitava Kumar.
Oh, yeah.
And I came to Vassar knowing that I wanted to be a journalist, though I was extremely unsure of how one went about doing such a
Right.
thing. And so I immediately signed up for Amitava's journalism seminar, and I think it wasn't until a few weeks into the course and I had submitted some writing to him that he took me aside after class and he suggested that I start writing for the Miscellany News. And I don't know, must have just gone to one of the meetings, or maybe I already knew some people on the paper, but I got involved on the MISC, writing for the features section. I'm not sure if that section of the paper still exists, but I think it does.
Yeah.
And I remember my first assignment was to write about a new, like, little deli that had opened and is no longer.
Okay.
It was like right across the street from campus somewhere.
Like where my market is now, maybe?
Yeah, but like kind of perpendicular to that.
okay.
But so I remember being really nervous. I'd never, gone out and interviewed anyone in person before. I think I brought my roommate with me just for like moral support. And I filed my article, and that was sort of it for me. Like, I became a regular writer on the features desk. That's where I met one of my best friends, Chris Gonzalez, who was also writing for the desk. We became co-features editors together, and wrote many articles together because often we needed to fill many pages of the section that we didn't have enough articles for. From there, I think my trajectory was like features editor, and then I became a senior editor when my friend Chris was the editor-in-chief, and then I became the editor-in-chief of the paper, and then I became a contributing editor. And all along, between semesters or school years at Vassar, I started out at the Poughkeepsie Journal with my first internship there. That's what I did the summer after my freshman year. My sophomore year, I worked at another local magazine, Chronogram, which is in Kingston. Yeah. And I got writing clips from both of those internships, which felt so lucky and special at the time. And then I interned in the city at the New York Observer one summer. So, yeah, I mean, right, it really started at Vassar in the Hudson Valley. I'm from the Hudson Valley, so that was sort of a big part of how I was able to make those internships work. I lived at home with my parents over the summer because, and maybe we'll talk about this more later, but at the time that I was entering journalism, the idea of a paid internship was not fathomable to anyone. Also, like, the idea that writing for the internet was something that you should be paid for was something people hadn't really caught on to yet. It was like blogging. It's like, that's just something you do for free.
Hobby,
it's like a hobby. So I kind of came up in that golden age of internet blogging and, none of these things were paid. So I also had jobs every summer that I worked to sort of pay for the internships. I did get like credit through Vassar for them also.
Right.
So it was like up to
It was
code.
loosely beneficial, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's how it worked at the time.
Wow, that's such an incredible story, and there's so much there that I want to tease out. So the first thing is, outside of Vassar, but here locally in the Hudson Valley, I want to hear you talk more about your experience working for the Pojo, the Poughkeepsie Journal, and the Chronogram, because they're both sort of these very, I won't call them niche because they're not niche, but they're real local journalism, right?
Yeah.
And Poughkeepsie is a relatively small to medium place, right? And it's a very local, some might say parochial, like kind of place, right? And so I'm curious what that experience was like for you and what you learned about not only journalism, but also the areas in which you were reporting by taking on this role as a reporter or as a writer for local outlets.
That's a great question. So my first assignment at the Poughkeepsie Journal was over Memorial Day weekend. And every year, and maybe the paper still does this, I'm not sure, but they would send journalists out across the Hudson Valley to cover like every Memorial Day event, which to me, I'm like, now that I'm an editor and I make assignments and send writers places, I'm like, that kind of seems like overkill. But it was a great opportunity.
Right.
As, you know, my first day as an intern, they gave me, I think, 3 parades and events to go to, and I had to drive like very far, crisscrossing the Hudson Valley to make it to all of these places. And you would file sort of like short vignettes
Okay.
off of each of them. Like each would be like, I don't know, 250,
Right.
300 words because you were going to multiple, and then they'd run them all in the paper the next day. So again, because I am from the Hudson Valley, I sort of already knew just, you know, what was around, the sorts of things that happen here, and the local flavor, you could say. But it was a totally new experience to see it through the eyes of a journalist, i.e. myself, and actually have curiosity about where I grew up be like the job. You know what I mean? It's not just like, it's like part of my
happenstance.
job
Yeah.
to ask people and to get to know the people in the community and learn their stories and the local history and things like that. And at the Poughkeepsie Journal, I really felt like, you know, I was definitely treated differently as an intern in the sense that I didn't have the hard-hitting assignments of
Right.
the veteran journalists on the paper, but you know, they threw me right in, and I felt like, you know, I was doing real journalism. And then at Chronogram, it's an arts magazine. Growing up in the Hudson Valley, you know, it's changed here since the 90s when I was born. And, you know, there was always lots of art and culture in the Hudson Valley, but people didn't necessarily always pay notice to it or, you know, support it. And growing up, I wasn't really that familiar with kind of what the Hudson Valley had to offer in terms of arts and culture. And at Vassar, that part of those interests of mine were really being fed. So it was cool to work on the Chronogram and see what plays are on around the town, and just
so
like
cool.
sort of feed those interests of mine. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Something you said earlier stuck out to me in particular, where you said it was an interesting and new experience, to paraphrase, for you to have your job to embody curiosity about where you're from. And it's so funny because that makes perfect sense, obviously. And it's sort of ironic, right? Because one would imagine that, like, of course, people would sort of be curious about where they're from, right? Independent of it being like an assignment, right?
Totally, yeah.
But of course, we all know that's not how life doesn't always afford you the opportunity to do that, right? Like, you could have curiosity and that's fine, but you may not be able to actually like explore your curiosity about the place you're from, right? And so it's sort of a nice way of reminding ourselves that stories always sort of exist around us, right? They can be dormant or untapped or unseen, but like there are certainly stories around, right? We may just not have the time to find them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that Professor Kumar really instilled in me too. And I think all of his students, many of whom have gone on to also be journalists or editors or writers, but he would kind of like email me story ideas and be like, maybe you should get in your car. You have a car, right? Like, just go check this out.
Right.
Like, he, I think, really has the philosophy for his own writing too, that like stories are everywhere.
Yeah.
And if you sort of are able to defamiliarize things for yourself a bit, you know, like, again, especially if it's like the place you grew up, you kind of like walk around, you're like, oh, the same stores, the same roads,
Yeah.
the same
Your routine sort of have inertia.
Yeah, and you stop like being alive to what's around you and seeing that maybe there's something interesting there. And I think that's what has always really resonated with me about journalism, is just maintaining a constant sense of curiosity about the world around you, about the people around you, and just keeping that little flame going inside yourself.
That's so beautiful. Spoken like a writer. So you started writing at Vassar, or started writing in a journalistic way at Vassar, of course, and then you graduated. And then before becoming an editor, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you writing for everybody, right? You have these writing credits all over the place. So, of course, at the Times, my favorite, The Cut, we can talk about that in a little bit, all kinds of places. So as a writer, sort of in the field of journalism, sort of what, this is a funny question, but what is your philosophy? Like, how do you sort of embody what you think is your ethic, your ethos, if you will, as you think about storytelling, finding a story, you know, where do you find inspirations for your stories beyond people telling you here is one? Like, just talk to me about your experience as a writer solely.
Yeah. So I've done so many different kinds of writing,
Yeah.
and I think now that I'm an editor and also just older and have, you know, been in journalism for longer, one of my philosophies has become it's okay to write about lots of different things and cultivate different interests. And writing a bunch of book reviews doesn't mean you can't also report on abortion access, and writing about abortion access doesn't mean you can't also write a blog
Right.
about a celebrity that's silly. And when I started out as a writer, I had a bit more anxiety about what kind of writer I was going to be. And I really put sort of a premium on the idea of being like a hard news journalist. Like, that just seemed like the most prestigious thing that you could be, and something that really appealed to me. And I still have like that desire
bit of that,
inside
yeah.
of me. Like, again, that's part of just acknowledging that like all of these different kinds of ways of writing are possible for the same person. But yeah, I just had a very sort of like narrow idea. And then as I had sort of a tumultuous journey in journalism, at first I was getting kind of like rattled by the notion that kind of getting laid off and having to take jobs and assignments that weren't part of my plan, that would kind of like throw everything off. And also just in terms of like defining yourself for other people, there's a huge emphasis on personal branding in the world in general, and sort of being able to create a coherent narrative about who you are and what you do. And I felt a lot of pressure about that at first. Also just like the idea of the beat journalist, like the idea is like you find your beat and you
Right.
become an expert, and that is one way to do it. And it's a great way. Like, the Times has tons of amazing beat journalists, but it's not the only way to be a writer. So I think that's sort of like a meta answer to your question,
Yeah,
but
super
that's sort of
helpful.
like part of my life philosophy now. In terms of thinking about stories and looking for stories, so many of the things that I write about and now assign to other writers are things that come up when I'm talking to my friends, when I'm reading. Could be something that came to me when I'm reading a nonfiction book, a novel. Like, I really think ideas are everywhere.
Yeah.
And if you have something that fascinates you, there will be a way to sort of make it into a story. So sometimes writers come to me, or like I have my own fixations, but writers will come to me and be like, I really want to write about, I don't know, like some broad theme.
Sure.
And I'm like, yeah, that's like a theme, but it's not really a story. But you're clearly very fascinated with this thing. So just kind of like keep the thoughts bouncing around, and like the opportunity will present itself,
Right.
like the perfect kind of, entry point into that idea. So that's also sort of how I think about ideas and stories. Like, I have a sort of constellation of things that I find myself always coming back to and fascinated by. And now that I'm an editor, I sort of like sit back and wait for those things to mature and become stories. As a writer, like, I had to be writing constantly.
Yeah.
So it was a bit different then.
On that point, this is super interesting. So you sort of gave us this framework of theme, but not necessarily a story yet, right? And so that prompted me to think about what, I know it's probably it's not a perfect question, but work with me. What is sort of the anatomy of a story, right? As distinct from just being a theme, like what in that sort of cocktail of things would make something a story as opposed to just a theme?
So this is something I'm going to talk to students about
Wonderful.
later. It's one of the slides in my
great.
presentation,
Okay, you're
because
prepared.
I have been thinking about this a lot, because as an editor, I get a lot of pitches that are more topics or themes and not stories. And so I was thinking about what are the essential
Perfect.
ingredients, and it's like also not every story
Right.
has all of these
Yes.
things, but most have
Yep.
some
A
of them.
majority of these
Yeah,
things, or a good
exactly.
number. Yep.
So one of them is like, the most basic one is just like something new.
Okay.
Something new is happening, and there's a timeliness to it. So often, like as an editor, you're like looking for a peg. Like if you were like, oh, I want to write about like non-monogamy, I'd be like, oh, like that's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot to say there. Oh, and I see like there's a book there's someone's writing a memoir about
Right.
her open marriage.
Yeah.
It's coming out. Like, why don't we wait for that book to come out, and you could sort of like
Comment on it.
comment on it and put your ideas in conversation
Right.
with this book and report around it, or write a review or whatever it is. So it's timeliness, it's something new, it's urgency. Sometimes people have good ideas, but they don't feel urgent.
Okay.
Like, and by that I just mean, like, sometimes someone's like, oh, I want to write about this figure, political figure, celebrity, writer.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, why should we write about them right now?
Right.
Like, is there a reason? Are they doing something different? Are they coming out with new work? Have they just had some like loud opinion that's in the news that we feel we need to comment on? Or, sort of like, how do we enter a discourse is something I think about a lot with stories. You don't always want to be responding to the news. Sometimes you want to be starting a new conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think of it as like, what ideas are sort of in the mix right now, and do we have an intervention that we could make with a story?
Yeah.
And then the other things are like an original voice or an original take. Just something original. Like, it could
Yeah.
either be the style that the writer wants to write
Right.
in, that person's voice or singular perspective, or they're like, oh, everyone's talking about this thing in the news this way, but actually I think they're talking about it the wrong way.
Right.
I think we should be focusing on this aspect.
Yeah.
So yeah, a combination of those things together is usually what makes a good story.
That's so cool. As you're talking, I was excited and learning so much, but also so confused. I'll tell you why. No, I'll tell you why. Not because you weren't clear. It's because I was just grappling with many thoughts. One of which being, you kept saying like, you know, you kept referring to the news, but it's so funny because of course the Times is
Right.
for many folks the news,
Yes.
right? So I was like, wait, what is she talking about? Like, who are they? You know, like I guess the question legitimately is like, as you're thinking about the Times and the writers you support under the Times as part of this larger ecology, right? Like, who are you all? I don't mean individuals or publications per se, but like, who else are you considering to be part of that ecology, right? You're saying the news is talking about it X way, this writer wants to talk about it Y way. Like, who is that set that you're thinking about, who
Yeah.
you're responding to?
Totally. So, well, because on Styles is a unique desk at the Times, we are often responding, like, I go to the Times homepage and I read the news like everyone else, and I think, like, what is another angle on this?
Yeah.
You know, the Styles desk writes about more than fashion.
Yes. Can we pause here for a second? So
Yeah.
this is one of my questions for you, and I anticipate others have the same question. I, to your point, was like, style section. Okay, like she writes about fashion. Not you particularly, but that's what I assume would be
Right.
the majority of the work, right? And then I go and I look at like digitally the front page, the style section. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much more than fashion, right? Like, in the last day, it was like Malala and Hillary's like Broadway show, right? Or like Nelly and Ashanti's like relationship, or a range of different kinds of things, right? The cowboy style, like generally, right?
Yep.
Super cool thing, but not like this sort of narrow perspective of what I would have thought style meant, right? So as you were going to do, I just want to give that sort of that background. Can you sort of flesh out for folks who are unfamiliar sort of what the style section covers and what sort of is the charter or sort of the charge of the style section from your perspective and the editorial board's perspective?
Yeah. So the Stylist desk is led by Stella Bugby, who used to run The Cut.
Love the cut.
For cut
We have to
heads.
talk about the cut in a little bit, but let's go back to style.
So she's my boss, and she leads the vision of the desk. And a lot of it is about her sensibility. So Styles is a place where it's sort of like it can change depending on who runs the desk. And this is true of all desks.
right? Okay.
Like the politics editor might be like, we covered the last election this way. Like, this is what I really want to do this time. The business editor could be like, you know, this is how we're covering inflation in the Fed, and this is my vision. So every desk has an aspect of this. It might be like more apparent for readers of the styles section. But yeah, a lot of it is about kind of Stella's sensibility and her vision, and then like the specific interests of the people she hires on the desk.
Yeah.
Like, I really love to read. I'm kind of part of a literary world in New York. I'm really fascinated by literary culture, by the many little magazines that have cropped up, and the social scene around those magazines. And so Stella knew this when she hired me, that I like to do stories about other writers. I like to do stories about books and book parties and magazines and magazine parties and readings. So it's like when she hired me, like now that's going to be a part of the desk.
Right. Like you're bringing your interest
Yes.
particularly to the desk in ways they wouldn't necessarily have had to been there before you got there.
Absolutely.
Got it.
So no, that's just part of the coverage, which is great, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, like all of my other coworkers have their own sort of like fascinations. My coworker, Luis Lucero, really loves theater and costuming, and he's always doing stories about the costumes of different operas and stuff. He was really interested in like graphic design, so he always likes doing stories about fonts.
Yeah.
Or like if a designer changes their font
It's
or
a thing.
something. Like, so yeah, everyone has their sort of like
so cool.
niche interests. But I would say, to sort of like zoom out of that a bit,
Yeah.
Styles is about people and how they live their lives, how the way that we all live our lives is changing, the different forces that shape our lives day to day. I think one way I think about it is like we take things that people think of as not being serious and we
Yeah.
elevate them to a level of
That's my
seriousness.
life.
And then we take things that are very serious and maybe we find the levity
Yes.
in them or a way to make them lighter or have readers sort of like find their way into a larger story. Like,
So for example, like all my Bravo fascinations like could be in the style section, right? Like you could talk about the sociology of a Housewives franchise in style.
Totally.
Love.
Yeah, so it's just an amazingly broad mandate. And it really is about sort of the angle that you find and that resonates with you. And yeah, like today, I'm thinking of the stories that are up today. Like Mark Zuckerberg is going to give Meta's quarterly earnings report. Recently, his style has changed a lot, and he used to be a guy who just wore like a gray T-shirt and a hoodie all the time, and now he's like, I don't know, becoming some kind of like menswear
Yes.
guy.
I love that.
So it's like if you go to the homepage, there's a story about Meta's earnings, and then right below it, it's like,
Here's what Mark is wearing
And it-
differently.
and it like
Yeah.
they feed each other. Like
Of course.
Mark Zuckerberg is creating an image, and that has a lot of power. So we also think about power in like as a very like broad theme
Let's
of
talk
the
about
desk.
it. Yeah. So in what ways do you all think about power, and how do you attend to it, distribute it, sort of focus it, any other set of verbs through the work you all do on the styles desk?
So I think one thing we try to do is sort of map it out. So you mentioned a party that Hillary Clinton and Malala were at together.
Right.
So we have a party editor, a nightlife editor. She sends people out to a couple of parties every week. And it's sort of a mix of like galas and
Or,
society events and also like fun things that
right.
don't have publicists. You
Right.
don't need to pay $4,000
Of course.
for your ticket or whatever. So as part of that, it's like some people crop up at the same galas over
Mm-hmm.
and over and over again. And, I will help edit these stories. And I'm like, I have no idea who this person is, but she's at every
So
event.
interesting. Yeah, exactly.
So it's sort of like pulling back the curtain on sort of like, I don't know, power can kind of be like faceless sometimes.
Yeah, of course.
And so I think part of what the desk does is sort of like show you who those people are, map out this world that, if you can't afford the tickets to the gala or to make those donations and what have you, like you're not in that room. You don't know who those people are, but they actually do wield a lot of
Right.
power. So
And that
that's-
person, and just to add to that person that you're discovering in this sort of serendipitous sort of way could also be someone that actually, despite being in space that might seem inaccessible, might actually be an accessible person, right? Like they could be someone you
Yes.
might know or know of reasonably, right? That
Totally.
just happens to be in a world that you don't think you could be a part of, but that may not be true, right? Because there's someone who has this sort of, quiet force around them, and they're
Yeah.
not sort of the celebrity or not sort of the person that you'll see on the cover of the paper, but they actually, they're in these places, and they also could be your neighbor, right? Or someone you see at brunch or at the bar or whatever, right?
Totally. Yeah. And then there's also all of these social connections. I'm like, that person was at this party. And it's like, oh, yeah, like they have the same publicist or like his wife is a donor to her foundation, whatever. You start
Right.
to see how
Sort of a
power
hidden
works.
treasure map. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one aspect of it. I think the other part of it.
Sorry, just on that.
Yeah.
As you're saying that, sort of, and this is not only for you, but you can be the muse for this sort of topic or conversation, which is, I'm curious how you think about relative to power, sort of being proximate and being in it, but not being of it, if you will. Because you can imagine a world in which like you start to uncover this map that folks don't
Right.
have access to, right? And the knowledge of the map does give you power as well too, right? But theoretically, right? And I don't know if this is your philosophy or not, but I can imagine as a journalist, there's something you said about not sort of letting yourself be sort of subsumed by the thing that you're trying to report on, right? In this power example, it's even trickier, right? Because let's take as an assumption people sometimes are attracted to power for a variety of reasons, right? So how do you think about sort of, again, having the knowledge of these kinds of systems of power, but not letting yourself sort of creep into them if that's not your intention?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right. Well, it's like the Styles desk at the Times does wield its own form of power.
Right.
Like we both respond to news and culture and society, but
And
we
create,
shape
right.
it also. So holding those things in tension is really important, I think. And I think something we always keep in mind, and it's just like a given for us, though from the outside, sometimes I think people have different perceptions, is that we're journalists on the Styles desk. We're not at, like, you know, if we're at a party, it's not because we like everyone there and think it's great
Right.
to have $1 billion
Right.
and get to wear designer gowns. We have a journalistic interest and reason to be there. And our standards are still the standards of the rest of the New York Times. So,
Yeah.
and like, you would really be surprised how many times people will be like emailing and saying like, oh, like you put that photo of me in the article, but like I really don't like that. Could you just like pick another photo? Like things that just are so not allowed
Yeah.
for reasons of ethics and journalistic standards. And I think people don't understand that,
Yeah.
you know, the style section is composed of serious journalists.
Right.
And yeah.
It is funny, and of course I heard lots of salt lines in what you just said, but one that is hitting me most recently, of course, is that like you describe the style section as something that does, and I want to say this in the least valued way, but like it sort of brings levity to serious topics, but also sort of elevates things that might have had natural levity, if you will, right? And at the same time, like there are these strict and rigid standards, right, that you adhere to. There's not levity about the standards, right? We're not fluid on those things, right? And so it's
Absolutely.
I can imagine for the subject, the consumer, not the consumer of the news, but the consumer of like the situation, if there's someone at the gala, right, they can be confused, like, wait, like they're here and they're covering like something that seems really, you know, simple and silly, like my dress or my brooch or whatever at this party, but they're doing it in a very serious way. They're like, but wait, it's not serious. Like, why?
Right.
Like, why are they taking it so seriously?
A fashion like it's not like
Right.
your personal photo shoot. And you know, for lots of people, it's very exciting to be in the
course.
paper, so they want to look their best.
You laughing is killing me because it's like the irony of all of this is what's making it funny. It's the absurdity, irony. I love it. It's so funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, something I wanted to say also is that because Styles is meant to be like closer to the vanguard of culture, like we really want to capture things like immediately as they're happening. Like if there's some new trend that pops up or something, like we want to be on it right then and there. And we want to be part of what people are talking about.
Right.
And, you know, I think people don't associate the Times always with like being on it first, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think part of what we do on Styles is we try to like play with people's expectations of what they might expect to see in the pages of the Times and like what conversations we're willing to enter, and the things we want to talk about. And yeah, it can be a challenge to do that in a newsroom with so much history and with, you know, readers have certain expectations when they open the paper. And but the style section is always sort of like, while maintaining the standards of the Times very seriously, also trying to play on,
Of course.
like what can be in the pages of the Gray Lady.
I love that. I never heard that phrase before, actually. So I want to go back to something you said about sort of how the content of the style section is sort of constructed. And of course, you mentioned earlier Stella being sort of the person who leads the style section at the moment. And of course, she has her own sensibilities, as any of us would. And I'm just curious, and I don't mean this question critically at all. It's sort of just a matter of fact or observation. Sort of, what do you think is missing? What are the risks of having sort of a desk-like styles sort of be left up to someone, not Stella, just a person's sort of sensibilities, right? And sort of what kinds of culture or styles or whatever else do you think are often hard to capture because they're sort of not always someone's sensibilities, right? Like, what are some of the blind spots, I guess is the better way of saying it, that someone in Stella's role might have? And how do you all think about shining a light on some of those blind spots, like societally, if you will?
I mean, I think on styles, we have a sort of flat organizational structure. Like, Stella is the head, but she sort of has talked about it as like, we're all entrepreneurs. We're like I said, you advance your own interests. Right. So I think there's just so much space on that desk to, you know, advance different ideas and kind of like cover as wide a breadth of topics as we can. I mean, at other jobs, it can be frustrating. I've definitely, and not even like with the person who's leading the desk, but even like my editor. Right. Sometimes I've just had editors who are like, that's not a story, you know?
And it fits
and I'm
criteria.
Like, it is. Right. Which like now I'm on the other side and I'm like, maybe it wasn't a story, like, you know, whatever. Right. But, you know, I think on any desk, at any publication, you can't cover everything. And so you always need to be selective. And there can be disagreements about that. I think the important thing is always to have room for that disagreement and conversation.
Absolutely.
And like in past workplaces, it's been more difficult to have those conversations at times, especially in places that weren't unionized. Like, I'm a big proponent of unionized newsrooms, and a lot more of them have become unionized since I entered the industry. The Times is unionized. My last workplace, Vice, which no longer exists anymore.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Like many other places I used to work, doesn't exist, but it was unionized. The reason it doesn't exist has nothing to do with the union. But in places with unions, people just, it really changes the whole culture. People feel a lot freer in general to have disagreements, to speak up when something doesn't feel right, or just they have questions. And at earlier jobs, and you know, this also goes along with the fact that I was younger and so a little more timid about speaking up about things in the workplace. But it was harder to sort of have those conversations.
Certainly. Let's talk for a moment about the role of editor. And I think people generally in the public know that publications have editors, right? But I'll speak for myself in saying that until I talked to you beforehand, it was sort of opaque to me, sort of what the role of an editor was and sort of what you did, sort of what your mandate was in that role. And it's become more clear to me that it's actually a role that is often a balancing act of many things, right? Can you just reflect for me again and for others on that role and sort of things that you're holding that might be in competition by virtue of being an editor?
Yeah. So I have a mix of staff writers and freelancers. So I'm interfacing with both of those groups of people all the time. I'm getting tons of pitches. My email is really scary. And since I have a mic in front of me, I'll say,
I was going to ask you what numbers.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're probably, okay.
I'm apologizing.
That's so
if
nice
I owe
of
you an email, please have mercy on me. Please forgive me.
Since you said it, I have to ask, because I do judge on this dimension. How many unread emails are in your inbox?
So I'm not an inbox zero person, but I try to get close. And a lot of what I do every morning is I try to boil it down to the emails that require a thoughtful answer.
Right.
And then I look at them and I'm like, that's 40. Which, like, that's not a lot of
No, that's
people
very
have
respectable.
thousands of
Yeah,
emails.
that is unhinged.
But, you know, engaging with people's ideas, their story ideas.
Yeah.
A lot of them are writers who have stories in process with me. And then maybe at the same time, my writers at the times who are on staff there and I'm in charge of editing them need something from me.
Right.
And so I am always walking around feeling guilty about who I haven't answered. And I'm trying to get better at both answering people and just like accepting that it's impossible.
It's part of life. Yeah, exactly.
To answer everyone all the time.
100%.
So that's a big part of my job.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I'm editing stories in all different stages. I could be developing a story idea with someone on the phone in the morning, say they pitch me something, and I'm like, yeah, that's interesting, but like, I'm having trouble sort of like imagining how would you report that, or like, what would the headline be, or like, how would we get around this like reporting issue or something, and then we'll get on the phone and talk about it and also agree to just like deadline, rate, all sorts of things like that.
Right.
I have tons of meetings all the time. A lot of them are really fun to me where we're brainstorming ideas for the section with other editors.
Oh, cool.
On the desk. And then, yeah, sometimes, a lot of times, most days, I have like actual copy in front of me that I'm going through and editing. Some things are sort of like what we would call lighter lifts, like 800-word stories that are pretty straightforward and pretty easy to edit. Heavier lifts are like 2,000-word features that, you know, will have a lot of the same things as a news story, a lead, a nut graph, sources, but sometimes like putting the narrative and story together requires some doing and struggling.
Yeah.
So I'm often dealing with that. We have a print newspaper, so sometimes I'm meeting actual print deadlines and the print editors are like, okay, like this is your drop dead. Like I'm putting it in the pages right now, because they actually are a layer of editors too on top of our editing. So when they put things in the paper, they're not just like obviously copy pasting or whatever. They also read it and edit it. They catch my mistakes. Sometimes when I'm on the rare occasions I make mistakes, they catch them before it goes to print, and then we can all fix things before they run. They write new headlines because the online headline is often different from the print headline.
And so if for online, who writes them? They write it for print, but who?
That's me.
Oh, wonderful. Okay,
and yeah, like rarely do writers write their own headlines. It's usually the editors. My boss Stella is like the queen of headlines. She'll come in and like immediately have an idea for a better headline sometimes.
So similar question to asked before, it's a different piece. What makes the anatomy of a good headline?
Yeah, it has to be like the newness has to be there. A lot of times on styles, we try to raise like a provocative question. Question headlines are like pretty discouraged actually at the times, but sometimes they are fitting. But I shouldn't say discouraged. Like we try to avoid them because we try to just give people what they should know in the headline without any kind of like mystery up there. But in styles, sometimes we can like play around with the headline more. Sometimes they're more like magazine headlines almost. We avoid puns. Puns and headlines are usually pretty bad. And but yeah, we think a lot about the internet and what, you know, it's like the economy of attention, what will grab your attention. And we do think about, you know, we want readers to spend a long time with our pieces and make it to the end. A lot of readers will only read the headline, the summary, look at the top photo, maybe read the first paragraph and kind of leave. So we both think about like what information we can give them in that space that will help them understand the story, but also like how do you write the lead so that they keep the headlines so that they keep going and they don't just like keep scrolling through or go play Connections. Just
She's
kidding.
getting shady. No, it's okay. I can give it right back. I'm not going to, but I can appreciate it. Absolutely love that.
I'm teasing.
That's so cool. That's such a cool insight into the world, into a world that I consume but don't know much about. So thank you for sharing so much about that experience. On the experience of being an editor, though, I am curious, as you transition from writer to editor, what were some of the new perspectives or inputs or pressures that you were dealing with? I don't mean pressures in a dramatic way, but just what are some of the things you had to consider in ways that you had not considered before as a writer alone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so editing and writing are related, but different in many ways. Some of which I knew going into it. As a writer, I would say when I worked at Vice, my friend Cleo and I would be like, we're never going to be editors. Like, I really liked sort of being like purely a reporter. Like the things that I'm doing during the day are like calling people on the phone, going out to interview people, or like writing.
Yeah.
And I liked it being limited to that.
It's sort of like faculty and administration, right? Some of them really enjoy being only faculty members, and it's sort of they're like, oh my gosh, I would never do this soiled, dirty work of being an administrator.
Well, yeah, I would like look at my editors, and they would be in meetings all day, and I'd be like, I'm never going to a meeting. Like we would have meetings sometimes again, but it would be like brainstorming, and I was like, this is fun, and it would be like one a week.
Right.
So I was like, I don't want to go to meetings. I don't want to do people's invoices. I don't want to deal with the administrative work. And also, as a writer, I still do, like, it's kind of less now, but I still struggle with anxiety when I'm writing, writer's block, existential crises that can come up when you're writing and your byline is on something that lots of people will see. And I would often really rely on my editor to be like, I'm freaking out. Like this person was supposed to call me back. They never call me back. This spokesperson is doing something weird. I don't know how to deal with it. Like, help me.
Right.
And then as an editor, I was like, oh, like people are going to ask me for that help and support.
Right.
And I have to be able to give it to them. And that idea sort of made me uneasy at first. And then when I really stepped into it and also just got more skills as an editor, there was lots of training for me at the times, which is amazing. Yeah. I realized I did have the confidence to actually give that advice to people, and also that I liked having that relationship and being there for the reporter and being sort of like, okay, you're freaking out, but like I'm calm,
right?
And like everything's gonna be okay. So I don't know. That was both a surprising aspect of the job and sort of a surprising thing I learned about myself doing the job.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Before we head to our last section of our conversation, I want to sort of ask about something you hinted at earlier, which was sort of the erasure might be the word of many of the places you used to work before and used to write before. So Vice is one that comes to mind, of course. Vice, I used to love Vice. I used to consume all kinds of Vice content because it did have this sort of styles section-esque sort of like funkiness to it that I really appreciated, and things that otherwise wouldn't have been reported on or always reported on, or not always, but often reported on Vice. But Vice is not alone in this trend, right? There's several, particularly digital outlets that have sort of stopped existing and we knew them to exist before, which I think is unique because people often hear about, per our earlier discussion, sort of the decline of local print media, right? And that I think often gets most of the light, but there hasn't been as much conversation about the decline of like digital media as well. What do you make of that? How does it feel to have been at a place that you enjoyed working at ostensibly and found value in not being there anymore? And many people like it not being there anymore.
It's weird. I mean, I think it's a big existential problem for the industry. people haven't found that many great business models for journalism. And I think that's still a big question, because another thing that has happened as places have shut down is that actually like private equity will buy them and sort of make them a shadow version of what they were before, which is gross and I don't like it. And it degrades the whole industry also when that happens. So yeah, I mean, it's really like personally sad to me. Like one thing that I was doing when all of this stuff was happening at Vice, as it was going bankrupt, my friends who still work there were getting laid off. It was like, save your work. They're going to wipe out the whole site, which does happen sometimes. It hasn't happened at Vice yet.
Yeah.
But everyone was like, I was like, oh my gosh, I've written like hundreds of articles here,
Right.
like some that I'm still very proud of. And yeah, it's just scary to think that even like the historical memory of these places could just be wiped out. Like people think like print newspapers are ephemeral, but like so is the internet.
Right.
So yeah, and it's just bad for the whole industry and ecosystem. People should have many places to find news and just enjoy reading online. Like that's something that I really despair over. Is it's harder and harder to have fun on the internet these days, and there used to be many more outlets to go to where you could just read some weird thing, and like there needs to be the New York Times, and there also needs to be like lots of other places to read and go, and actually those other things like help the Times too. Like to me it's very sort of symbiotic and healthy.
Absolutely. Before we go into our student hot seat questions, I just have to talk about The Cut, because I told you I love The Cut, and I can't quite remember what my first introduction to The Cut was. I'm trying to think now. In my mind, there's like 3 or 4 like Cut highlights that like define my experience with The Cut. I'm gonna name them.
Your personal canon.
Yeah, that 100%. That's exactly how I describe it. So this is not in any order. This is just sort of how it's coming to my mind, which might be in order.
Okay, you better name a piece that I wrote. I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh, I don't think
No, I'm totally
did.
teasing. And also to clarify,
Yeah.
I think I've written like 3 things for The Cut. I never worked there full time, but I was so excited to contribute to them when I was a freelancer.
Too. It's incredible.
It was like a dream for me.
So the titles I'm not going to get right, but I'll talk about the subjects and you probably know what I mean. So the first is the Sarah Lawrence, I say scandal, but whatever, with like the parent and the harem, whatever, however you want to describe it. That was an incredible story. And of course, I at the time I wasn't working at Vassar, so it wasn't as if I had an association because I was like at a similar school. It just was an incredibly like riveting story.
Yeah.
The second, of course, I think this was in The Cut. Was Anna Delvey? Was that in The Cut?
Yes,
okay,
it
perfect.
was.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
The
been
New York
talked about so
Magazine.
many other places. So I don't know if The Cut was like what broke it, but that's where I read about Anna Delvey was The Cut. Loved.
Yeah,
And
watershed
I'm personally,
moment.
So let me tell you, I'm personally, in a very strange way, an Anna Delvey fan. I think she's crazy. I think there's all kinds of things that are unethical, all these things. But I'm like, wow, like,
yeah.
she
I
did
mean, I
that.
think you're not alone.
Yeah, of course.
I have my own sort of like. We'll talk
There are
about
problems.
this later.
Yeah, no, there are problems. I do think the way. Anyway, we'll talk about it later.
Because I have my own like theories and.
Oh, from the inside.
Because I think what you're saying is not from the inside, but just like my own sort of like theories about why she's like both celebrated and like reviled, villainized at the same time. I think it's really interesting.
Absolutely. My third is headline don't know, but the story about the Harvard professor who got scammed by the lady on the street. Remember the story?
This was recent, right?
Multiple years ago.
Oh, okay.
They might have. I think they've had updates.
Because there was just a story that came out by the writer Charlotte Cowles about how she got scammed out of $50,000.
That was my fourth one. No, so it's different.
Okay,
That was my fourth one though, because I just read that recently because she also was she's a finance writer for some. Okay, right. So it was ironic, obviously. But back to the third one, you have to read. If you haven't read it, which I'm sure you have to read it. It's about this Harvard professor who met this woman on the street and she effectively, Harvard law professor no less, who effectively sort of enticed him into getting into a relationship with her. And then as that happened, he realized she was already in a relationship. She ended up finding a way to sort of like scam him out of his house. And so like she like one day just like owned his home, and
I
he
feel
got
like
kicked out.
this
You
is
probably
ringing
heard
a
it.
bell.
Yes, it's such. I'm gonna send it to you.
I
It's
have
an
to go back. Yeah, I have to revisit it.
incredible story.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
The Cut is really great at finding these stories.
my gosh.
And yeah, the reporters there do such a good job with the actual like storytelling.
Incredible. I used to think that I didn't like long form journalism until someone sent me a article that was well done, one of these four or some other one, and I was like, whoa. Like, to your point, this is a fun experience to sort of read journalism on my phone, on my computer. It was, I mean, I enjoyed it. So I would like not get sleep because I was like reading a long form Cut article, right?
Yeah, and it's fun because like when there's a story like that, like everyone's talking about it. It's kind of like you're talking about like a new episode of television or like reality TV together or something. But yeah, it's fun when there's sort of like a communal reading experience.
Yes.
In the industry, we call it a talker.
Oh, I love that. I love all this new lingo that I'm adding to my lexicon. You reminded me before we go to our Heart Seat questions, I have to go back and try to find cut style section articles from the 80s, because I have started to recently watch our original episodes of Dynasty. And of course, Joan Collins like just had incredible fashion. And of course, the show broadly was like an interesting cultural thing. I'm intuiting from watching it now. And so I want to go back and see how it was talked about.
Yeah, that's what's really fun about working at the Times is like anything you can think of, you kind of like go into the Times archives and it's all
like,
there.
It's there.
Yeah.
I love it. Perfect. Let's go to our hot seat questions.
All right.
And I fear that I asked we talked about a couple of them already. So I'm going to go to number 2. Number 1, I'm going to think about because we sort of asked it. Number 2, how have you managed the switch from writing about politics, writing about style, and how do you just think about, you sort of talked a little bit, but how do you think about different writing styles and techniques based on the topic?
Well, one thing I would say is that we write about politics a lot in the style section. And personally, like, I'm trying to do more politics stories in the style section. You know, our politics coverage at the Times is incredible and so thorough, but there's just so much to write about, and style sort of has a unique angle into it too. So I don't even really think about it as being that
separate
different.
Or different. Yeah. That's super helpful. Thank you. The next question is, what was your most intense sort of story or reporting experience in your career?
Oh, wow. That's a hard question. Hard or intense? Yeah, like doing any in-person reporting is always intense. And I've covered a lot of like protests and public demonstrations in the past, both like at Vassar, which was really great, and
you mean last week?
Yeah. Yeah, well, when I was at Vassar, it was like Black Lives Matter was happening, Occupy was happening like the year that I got to campus. There was like there were lots of lots of protests happening, and I helped cover them on the student paper. One thing that was challenging when I worked at Vice, we weren't very organized. It was the 2018 midterm elections, and the managing editor at the time at Vice was like, if you could go anywhere, this was like a week before the election. She was like, if you could go anywhere, what election do you want to cover? Like, where do you want to go?
Right.
And I told her I wanted to go to Georgia to cover the 6th congressional district, where Congresswoman Lucy McBath was running. And then Stacey Abrams was also running
Right.
for governor at the time. But like the McBath campaign, I'm sure had a million other things going on. They were trying to win an election. And like, they really didn't give me access at all. I kind of just like showed up and like figured out somehow. I mean, they gave me some information about like what campaign events she was doing, like where she was going to be and stuff. Like I went to her election night event and everything, but really minimal details. And I remember being so stressed when I went down there, and just so anxious about it. But yeah, and I really didn't get that much access to her, but I did file like several stories. Now Senator Jon Ossoff was down there campaigning for her. He wasn't in office at the time, and I talked to him, and he was like, come, like, just follow me in your car. Like, I'll bring you to this other place. So it's really sort of like by the seat of my pants. But I think that's how, like,
that's how it is.
How it goes sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, you can't control for every situation. You kind of have to roll with it.
I love that. The last question I'm going to do an audible on because we just talked about it so much already, but I'll ask you a different question, which is, given your expertise and vantage point of the style section, what sort of beauty or lifestyle trends should we know about that we probably don't know about? Or like hack, like a trend or a hack.
Oh, a trend or a hack. Interesting. I can only think of ones that are sort of like already about to be over.
Oh, okay, let's hear them.
Like a big thing was like a pop of red.
Okay.
Like, and I have a pair, I'm not wearing them right
Me
now,
neither.
but I have a pair of red socks that I bought as a result of this trend, and a red sweater. There was like a popular designer right now is Sandy Lang.
Okay.
And she has really like made bows a big thing again.
Like the headphones?
Oh no,
Oh,
like
I'm sorry.
like ribbons.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like tied in a bow. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so
Her
cool.
clothes sort of like play on traditional femininity in an interesting way, and she's really brought back sort of like bows, and ballet core was like a big thing last year. I'm really not sounding like I'm on the cutting edge of,
it's so
trends,
cool.
but I don't know. We try not to be so prescriptive on the desk about actual trends.
Yeah. They're like inductive, if you will.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, Marie, thank you so much. Our time has gone by so quickly, but I've learned so much. I've enjoyed hearing parts of your story, and I'm so grateful that you're willing to share your reflection with us on the Saltline podcast today.
Thanks so much. Thanks for your great questions.
Of course. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of Conversations at the Saltline. We'll check in next time. Have a great day.